Hello comic fans, here's Earl Grey with the first one of my best of 2018 lists. Like the years before, I'll do separate videos for the best horror, crime, science fiction and adventure comics that had been published in 2018. This year I even plan to do a separate top 10 about the best single issues / floppies. Anyhow, for now it's all about the trades, whether they were omni-buy, collected editions of older material, graphic novels or what have you. And as you know, one of my favorite kinds of comics are those that deal with the real life. Biographies, autobiographies, or stories that are at least a bit more inspired by real everyday to-day life, or real incidents, whatever that means. And one guy who inspired a crowd of other comic creators to do their own autobiographic comics is John Porcellino. He has been doing his King Cat zines since I don't know when. Very minimalistic, not only in terms of his extremely reduced art style, down-to-earth ponderings of his own day-to-day life, or rather graphic diaries full of little observations that would maybe be disrespected in our own life as useless, uninteresting and boring, but become interesting and charming when we are forced to see the beauty in day-to-day life, even depicted in this minimal fashion. So the life of us readers suddenly seem more interesting as well. Drawn and Quarterly has published a collection called From Lone Mountain, with the King Cat zines from 2003 up to 2007. A great opportunity to get these poetic and personal documents of a very unique voice in comics. And extra props to John Porcellino for keeping up his mail order service Spit and a Half, where you can order not only the single King Cat zines, but a ton of other obscure zines and magazines that you won't get anywhere else. One book I've spoken already about is Olivier Ballet's and Pierre Christine's biography of Robert Moses, the master builder of New York City. It was a part of my overview of No Brow Press in panellogy 234. Pierre Christine is a favorite writer of mine, and I'm very interested in the history of big cities and New York City in particular. So this was actually a no-brainer for me, very true to the fact, almost documentary-like, but still entertaining comic. Okay, overworked attorneys, the confusions and ridiculousness that obviously comes with working at a corporate. These are not primal interests of mine, to be honest. I find it hard to relate to the combat, the exhaustion and strange demands that a job like that has to offer, at least sometimes. Frances, the protagonist in the comic Young Frances, is a young law clerk and realizes how her day-to-day life becomes her life. And that's of course an aspect I can relate to. And there are some very interesting side characters as well, like Frances' roommate. These stories seem to have been collected in Pope Hats before, Hartley Lynn's serial anthology. His cartoony and precise art style has grown on me with each page of Young Frances. But even more striking is his way of storytelling. I would call it elusive in a precise way. Not every detail is spoon-fed to us readers, but even if it's not mentioned, we are enabled to get the whole picture. On rank 7 there's Angloid from the small publisher Kilgore Books, which puts out a lot of Noah Van Sciver's fantastic books, by the way. Thinking about it, it's a shame that I could not include Blammo from Noah Van Sciver in this list here, just because it's his serial anthology and therefore not really fitting. Yeah, but check out Blammo. And check out Angloid by Alex Graham, a somehow autobiographic memoir about Alex Graham's or her protagonist's conflicts between her aspirations to become an artist, her love life, and the needs to survive when you're more the imbalanced, self-loathing, alcoholic type. I really dug the raw, independent, undergroundy drawings, and above all, the ruthless honesty of this kind of memoir. On 6, we have new stuff from Michael DeForge, Brett, about Miss D, a juvenile delinquent in a world where delinquency is considered to be an art form. She's famous for behaving against the rules of society to a point where her delinquent behavior is exactly what the society expects and wants from her. So regardless if she lights up police cars or pees in a TV show, she only gets more fans, gets more popular and embraced by mainstream society. Until she is the mainstream, and is eventually cast away as yesterday's sensation. DeForge really makes a point or two with this poignant satire, how pop culture shapes celebrities, the worshipping of delinquent and non-social behavior, and about the impossibility to escape the arms of conformism. Of course, you have to like DeForge's signature minimalistic, colorful and abstract art style. It was published by Koyama Press, who put out one more collection of shorter stories called A Western World from DeForge, which were at least partwise published before in his anthology Loose and Elsewhere. Yes, and that's very recommended as well. Number 5 is one of the best European comics that came out 2018, The Adoption, unfortunately just available as for now in French and German. Drawn by Arnaud Monin and written by Zidrou. The art style and the premise, grandfather has to deal with an adopted child, was actually not something I was too keen on. I expected some familiar Hollywood-esque tale like it could have been played by Robin Williams, for example. No disrespect to Robin Williams, but you know these kind of moody stories with a happy end. Some heartwarming kitsch with a grumpy granddad and his granddaughter. So I let it pass until I've read and heard raving critiques about it, and what should I say, the praise is more than justified. The characters in this two-part story felt real, for the most part unkitschy and relatable, the dialogues poignant and true, and more often than one time the story took a turn that I had not seen coming. Fantastic book, nice colorful artwork, and yes, if he would be still alive, it could have been played by Robin Williams, but it would be one of his better movies. We stay in Europe, but go more classic, since Möbius is maybe the guy almost everyone seems to refer to as an important influence. In Inside Möbius, Möbius draws Möbius as he encounters his own creations in a cartoony world, pondering about his life, art and comics. This is halfway a comic, halfway a diary. Dark Horse has published it as a trilogy in its Möbius library. It's rather a sketchy, loose and by nature self-referential commentary to his more important comics. But its personal character makes it very interesting, and the wit of Möbius is very enjoyable, of course. But I wonder if Dark Horse ever is able to put out the real Möbius goodies. So far the Möbius library has felt more like a collection of B-sides. It seems that they don't have the rights to publish the real hits, the more important works from him, which is a pity. On the other hand, I appreciate to get the more obscure stuff, which was not available before. Now we enter the top 3 with Somnambulance, again a Koyama publication. It's a collection of underground and wild comics from Fiona Smith, that I dig a lot. Don't be scared off by the quote on the back cover that claims these comics as some kind of feministic statement. In my book, it's just independent and raw and in-your-face honest. It's sexy, full of imagination and weirdly beautiful. It feels like the early Julie Doucet. You definitely can tell that a woman has drawn this stuff. It tells the stories from a female perspective, and for me that's definitely part of the appeal. And you can see her development as an artist in this collection of short stories, free-flowing art improvisations and part-wise biographic memoirs. My second favorite comic about real life is Royal City, written and drawn and colored and everything by Jeff Lemire. A 14-issue series collected in 3 softcover trades that tell the family story of the Pikes. Mother, father, 4 siblings, of whom the youngest brother died decades earlier and has haunted the rest of the family since. Many comic readers need a while to get used to Lemire's art. I for myself liked his scratchy sketchiness from the beginning when I read Essex County for the first time. Since then, Lemire has refined his art a bit. His drawings seem a bit more self-reliant. I love it how his loose, almost doodle-like creations start to live and breathe and become fully fleshed out and, yes, real characters. And as to Royal City, this one really overwhelmed me in the last trade. The first 2 were pretty good, but man, in the last 5 chapters, when everything comes to a worthy conclusion, it was brilliant. I've read a lot of comic series recently that started like fireworks, but petered out eventually. Royal City is absolutely not like that. A well-planned and more than just satisfying finale. Sometimes it's just a good thing when everything is done by one creator. Talking about masterpieces by one creator, my favorite slice of life comic from 2018, and not only that, my favorite comic of 2018 by a margin, period, should not come as a surprise, at least not if you had watched Panellogy 229 about Berlin from Jason Lutz. I could repeat all my praises, but I rather recommend to watch that video, or even better, just grab this wonderful book. This was my first top 10 comics of 2018 list. Let's see what I'll do in my next video. Crime, horror, adventure, sci-fi. At least one thing I can tell you, I have still a ton of amazing books to show and tell about. So, thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.